Welcome to this New Nutrition Business Podcast. My name is Julian Mellentin, and I need to begin with an apology because I haven't actually recorded a podcast since February 2024. I have to confess that, in fact, I had no idea how many months had passed. It's now something like September the 11th or 12th. And that just goes to show how very busy we've been for this year. And not just have we been busy, but we also have families as well to whom we occasionally must pay attention, both the younger generation and the older generation, all of whom have managed to be sick and unwell in the past 12 months. So you're not here to listen to my personal problems. I decided we'd restart our podcast series by talking about something really positive that anyone in the food industry can do in order to be successful. And what is that? Well, if you're thinking about your new product development strategy, the strategy for your business, the most consistently successful strategy in food and health in the whole of our industry, in every country in the world, is based on, quite simply, taking a traditional food and reinventing it, making it more convenient, making it better tasting, and then finding a new group of consumers to enjoy it. An awful lot of discussion about innovation in food and health or food and drink in general often gets bogged down about thinking about exciting new technologies, whether that's plant-based meats or animal-free dairy produced by fermentation. But the reality is, if you look back over the past 25 years, and particularly over the past 10 years, it's this idea of taking a traditional food and reinventing it and modernizing it, which is consistently the most successful. It is, in fact, a tremendous skill for everyone in the food industry. It is the thing we are good at. And new product development teams are very good at adapting tastes or textures from one country to another, or making a food that's traditional and inconvenient more convenient for modern consumers. And it is these steps which have created the biggest disruptive innovations, and I apologize for using that overused business school phrase, but they have created the biggest disruptive innovations in food and health. And they've given birth to whole new market segments that did not previously exist. And I'll give you a few examples in a moment. For me, one of the best examples of this strategy of reinventing the traditional comes from Japan. And I make no apologies for that, because the Japanese market is easily one of the most, if not the most, innovative and creative in the world. It's Japan that gave birth to our modern Western obsession with eating healthier foods. And you'd be surprised at the number of food technologies and types of foods which are successful in the West, which actually all originated in Asia and particularly in Japan. Those of you who've got access to New Nutrition Business through our website, and if you haven't, I urge you to go and get that sorted out for yourself. You will see that our lead case study in July this year was on a product called Tofu Bar. And that's made by a Japanese company called Asahiko. Now, Asahiko is one of Japan's leading tofu companies. And as you can imagine, tofu is a huge market in Japan, worth more than $2 billion. And what Asahiko did was they took tofu, a traditional part of the Japanese diet, and they figured out a way to make it more relevant and more convenient for modern consumers. Now, the fact is, in Japan, sales of tofu are actually declining. It's traditional food used as an ingredient in all kinds of cooked dishes, and possibly a bit boring, and possibly oriented a little bit too much towards the older consumer. And part of the problem is that in Japan, tofu is only available in really non-convenient product forms that are designed for you to process and put into your cooking yourself, or at least that used to be the case. So what Asahiko did, even though it was a very traditional company, very well established in the field, is it looked around at the declining tofu market, figured out that they needed to make tofu more relevant to younger, more convenience-oriented consumers, and they created an entirely new and more convenient product format, which is called Tofu Bar. In other words, just like a snack bar, but made from tofu. the company identified a group of consumers who needed this greater convenience, a convenience the existing traditional product couldn't provide. They identified the type of product that people were already consuming, which was a bit similar, and which would be the target to beat. And actually, this is something called salad chicken. So you'll find this in lots of convenience stores in Japan. And it's like chicken breast presented in a packaged form, and you can take it out of the package and you can eat it just like a bar, or you can put it on top of your salad at lunchtime. And as salad chicken has become such a huge success throughout Japan, it's in every 7-Eleven and every other type of convenience store, they decided to make its convenience, its texture, its portability, all part of their targets and the standard that they had to beat. Masahiko also remembered that people eat because they like to enjoy themselves and have pleasure, so they're focused on providing flavors and textures that would meet and exceed consumer expectations. And they also worked on delivering the nutritional benefit the target consumer, younger people, mostly office workers, the nutritional benefit they wanted, which was 10 grams of protein, which wasn't easy to do with the traditional tofu product. So with its simple ingredients, because it's basically just tofu and a couple of other things, extreme convenience, interesting flavors, easy to understand health benefit, and backstory of traditional usage, tofu bar has actually become a huge success in Japan. So from its launch at the end of 2020, tofu bar rapidly became a hit product. By the end of 2023, which is the most recent year for which we have information, it was selling 64 million bars a year, which I think is a couple of $100 million, which is impressive from a standing start. And yeah, this product is about using food technology to make something more available. It's about packaging technology. But the essence of it is taking something as traditional and familiar to consumers and simply making it better tasting and more convenient. Now, I've started with a slightly unusual example for Western listeners, but in fact, if you look around Western markets, it's exactly the same story. Greek yogurt is one of the most successful examples of reinventing a traditional food. So in the US, back in 2007, an entrepreneur took Greek yogurt and he took it to US consumers as something new and fresh and satisfying. Its thick texture was a revelation to Americans who until then had been used to thin, overly sweet yogurts held together with starches. So it provided them with a huge step change in how they could enjoy yogurt. And yes, there's a protein element. It's the protein that gives the mouthfeel, but really it's the overall enjoyment, the novelty factor, which was a big help. Now, consumers, huge number of consumers, are food explorers. People are always looking around for something new and interesting. And the Chobani brand, debuting in the US, actually created this sense of excitement with something entirely different. And you all know how successful both Chobani has been and how big the US Greek yogurt category has been as well. Skyr, for example, has been a success in multiple markets, from Sweden to France to the United States. And who had heard of Icelandic yogurt until a few years ago? But Skyr provided a new taste experience with a health halo, and people like the idea of a product from somewhere else that's traditional and healthy. And when people want a traditional food reinvented, it's not just one from their own country. They're perfectly happy to have a traditional food from somewhere else. And why is this? Because people like interesting stories. And they find a backstory of traditional usage and association with health reassuring. Even a giant brand like Yoplait in the US, which had managed to miss out on the Greek yogurt trend, even Yoplait has learned how to innovate with a traditional food strategy. So in 2017, the company debuted a brand called Oui by Yoplait, a French-style yogurt sold in single-serve glass pots. So the brand combines very strong French provenance, it's all made in the US, of course, with artisanal-style packaging. So instead of culturing the ingredients in large batches and then filling individual pots, wheat is made by pouring ingredients into the individual glass pots, which are then cultured for 8 hours, resulting in a thick texture. Wheat's promise it is made with simple, non-GMO ingredients, and the ingredient list is usually very short, like whole milk, pure cane sugar, real fruit, and of course yogurt cultures. It contains no artificial preservatives, no artificial flavors, no colors. Unsurprisingly, in 2018, its first full year on the market, the brand is one of the 10 most successful new launches in the United States, with first-year sales of over 80 million. And we have been able to find out the exact number, but it seems to be north of 200 million now. Why is this? People like the idea of something being simple, traditional, and real. And the other big progress in terms of a traditional category in reinvented is cottage cheese. Now, some of you will have heard about how cottage cheese has had a massive uplift in sales in the US, in Sweden, in the UK, and lots of other places over the course of the past 2 years. And this success is attributed to social media attention, specifically from TikTok. So beginning in the US in early 2023, cottage cheese, which has been around for a very long time and was a diet food in the 1970s, it started to enjoy a rebirth. So consumers started using it to make healthier versions of ice cream or pancakes and make videos of it on TikTok. So American cottage cheese sales were driven upwards within the space of a year by 16% to a total of 1.33 billion, which is very impressive. So not only did sales go up, volume went up by 11%. And that was an amazing achievement in a year in which most supermarket categories were flat or volumes fell. The market leader, called Daisy Dairy, experienced a 36% jump in sales. And even small brands benefited, such as the Good Culture brand, who sell cottage cheese, but with probiotics added. Their sales ballooned by 57% to about 76 million, and their volume was up 31%. In the UK, one producer has reported in 2024 a 40% increase in sales of cottage cheese, attributing it to the TikTok craze. In Sweden, it's a similar story. Arla, which is the biggest dairy company in Scandinavia, said that sales of their cottage cheese in Sweden have grown 15% over the past few months. So Arla says their production of cottage cheese in Sweden went up 30% in total. Social media's embrace of cottage cheese as a versatile ingredient, that is important, but it's not just because of social media. The sales boost has happened because cottage cheese is natural, versatile, has few ingredients, works with many flavors and textures, and it's an easy way for people to get more quality protein in their diet. It's a great product, but it's also a traditional food. It doesn't need much explaining. Even in cultures where cottage cheese is not commonly consumed, such as France, it's very easy for French consumers to get what cottage cheese is all about. If you had an entirely new type of food that consumers had never heard of before and had never tasted or tried, and thinking about dairy, something like a product made from animal-free dairy proteins produced by precision fermentation, no matter how much attention TikTok gave you, it would really be difficult to get sales because of the absence of that reassuring traditional food backstory. So here's a checklist for a successful traditional foods reinvented strategy. You don't have to hit all of these points, but the more you can hit, the better. Number 1, focus on taste and texture. Sounds obvious, doesn't it? But that is why people eat food, and very often in the food industry, everyone loses sight of that. Number 2, understand who you are targeting. So with cottage cheese, I don't know exactly who anyone thought they were targeting, but clearly the appeal to the young for its convenience, its versatility, and its fun factor was very strong. You may actually only want to start with one group of consumers, and you might want to move on to others, but you've got to start somewhere, and you need to know who that is. 3, focus on convenience and versatility, as Asahiko did in Japan with its tofu bar, and most of the other examples I've given you. 4, you've probably got this one by now, provenance and backstory. If you can bring to your market a product which may be everyday and uninteresting in market A, as Greek yogurt was in Greece 20 years ago, but it's totally new and different and exciting in market B, as Greek yogurt was in the United States, then that is what consumers are looking for. And you can also reinvent a traditional food that's established in your own home country, as Asahiko showed with the tofu bar. Number 5, connect to multiple consumer health trends. So you can only really connect to the ones that make sense for your category. So in all of the examples I've given you, well, the protein story is part of the picture. It's that health picture, which is easy for people to understand. It helps make the product permissible. In most cases, also, it's about fewer ingredients or more natural ingredients. But these are just two examples. It really depends what category you're looking at. And number 6, if you're bringing new benefits to the category, make sure that in your target consumer's mind, they are credible for the type of product. So protein in cottage cheese, if you want to big that up, well, that's fine. It's easy for people to get that. Likewise, probiotics in cottage cheese. Sounds like a bit of a stretch, but in the US, it's worked for the Good Culture brand. People know that cottage cheese is a cultured thing. So simply talking about the fact you've made it more good cultured seems to work for American consumers. The strategy of traditional food reinvented is the most successful strategy in the food industry because it aligns with what consumers want. And although our industry is very dependent on technology, technology gives you shelf life, it gives you food safety, it gives you convenience. The fact is that consumers take all that technology for granted. What they don't want is for technology to be shoved in their faces. So technology has to be discreet. It has to be able to deliver those sorts of consumer benefits. If you take technology and you push it in the consumer's face, then you're going against all of the success factors that have made traditional foods reinvented such a successful strategy. So to give you an illustration, animal-free dairy protein produced by precision fermentation. You've probably read lots about that recently. The idea is that one particular fraction of dairy protein can be reproduced and put inside dairy products, and then the hope is that consumers will buy it. The only challenge is, of course, that we've seen a real market test in the US for the past 4 or 5 years, and then maybe 25-something brands have been tried, and there's been test markets by big companies, Nestle, General Mills, Mars, and many others, and almost all of those brands have completely disappeared or sell on a niche basis. And why is that? Well, you're talking to consumers about a new technology, and they're very reluctant to put new technology in their mouths unless you give them some obvious, really clear advantage. And unfortunately, all the animal-free dairy protein brands that have been tried have failed to do that. They've provided no consumer advantage in taste, texture, convenience, price, or nutrition. So what's the consumer left with at the end of the day? A piece of technology that claims to be more sustainable. But there's no way for them possibly to know whether it's sustainable or not. I give this as one example, but throughout the course of the past 20-odd years in the food industry, we've had many others. Hardly anyone, I imagine, remembers a fat replacer called Olestra from the late 1990s, when the idea was to replace all saturated fats with alternative fats. It was a total turn-off for consumers. They didn't want some chemical-sounding fat-like substance put in their Lay's potato chips. Humans, we should remember, eat food. They do not eat technology. And that's why they want us, more than anything else, to give them traditional foods with a reassuring backstory about traditional usage and nutrition and more simple ingredients. I hope that you found this podcast helpful. I promise we'll be doing more, starting again, well, now. If you'd like to know more about us, or if you'd like to take out your own access to all our resources are online, and you really should actually, then the place to go is www.new-nutrition.com. I hope you have an excellent day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.